Hey there, all you happy bubble makers or not so bubble makers right now. Dive, dive, dive. Yes, that's what we'd all like to hear right now, but we can't. So we're going to talk about diving instead. We've got some wonderful new panelists on the show today with us. We've got our lovable and huggable David, though at a 60-foot distance huggable. We've got our very own AJ, a newcomer to our instructor patch here. He's happy to talk to you. And we've got our very own Captain Joe. So without further ado, I'm going to get some introductions going on. David, you want to say hi to us?
Hey everybody, I'm David. I'm an instructor at Rainbow Reef, and I am only huggable at 6 feet, like he said.
Thank you. AJ.
Hey guys, AJ here. I'm an instructor here with Rainbow Reef as well.
Nice. I see you have some wonderful wall art. Fish are definitely a Key Largo must. And Captain Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Ross. How's everybody doing today? My name is Joe. I'm one of the captains at Rainbow Reef. Happy to be able to partake today and spend some time with you guys since you're unable to join us on the boats.
Well, thank you very much. We have what we think are some fun topics held over or brought over from the other day. We're going to follow up talking a little bit about the digital underwater photography specialty and night diving at the same time and how you might be able to take some photos at night. We actually had a really interesting question that we're going to get to, hopefully, and ask one of our panelists if they've got an idea about it. Then we're going to talk about some boat do's and don'ts and some ideas from our head captain himself, Captain Joe. So without further ado, let's just jump right in there. All right. David, why don't you talk to us a little bit about photography since I understand that you have a really cool setup yourself?
I do. So basically, the underwater digital photography course is a specialty, a PADI specialty. You can do an adventure dive in it for your AOW if you want. You could take it as a separate specialty. Taking pictures underwater is challenging but fun at the same time. And the course basically exists to give you some tips about, well, some things about how to make sure that your camera doesn't flood, your housing doesn't flood, getting in the water in the right way, sort of proper maintenance. But the really fun part is underwater, and you get different types of tips about how to hopefully get some better pictures or video as well, because we have a video course. Things like keeping your camera turned up a little bit, angled up towards the sun. It brings in some more light. Things like, if you can, taking the same picture at multiple exposures. So maybe if what you thought was the right exposure was over, underexposed, you have some other ones to play around with. And of course, then you can always download your photos onto your computer and get into some photo editing. Yeah, there you go. So it's a great course.
Or as a matter of fact, I do know this. There's actually even an e-learning for digital underwater photography. Not only that, you can start your digital underwater photography in your confined water sessions as early as your open water course. After dive number 3 and 4, you can start playing with the camera and getting to know it, and then you could be certified as digital underwater photography level 1, which is pretty cool. And then you bring it into the open water. So too, you can actually start your e-learning anytime. Either you can follow an affiliate link on our site on www.rainbowreef.com, or you can call in and we can start some of your e-learning as soon as we get off the phone. We can get you that code. We can start that. Your open water, your advanced, your rescue, dive master. I actually have an IDC and a dive master course going on right now that we're doing through the technology, much like Carlos is showing you with Zoom classrooms, and it's a lot of fun. So AJ, tell me something. What what part of the United States do you hail from? Because right now we've got people from Maryland, from Boston, from Alberta, from Texas, Canada, California. Where do you hail from, sir?
Actually, I am from all over. I was born in Phoenix, Arizona. I spent like the first 7 years of my life, maybe 8 years, traveling all over the country. My stepdad did HVAC for nuclear power plants, so we moved like every 3 months. So I've lived in like 15 different states, but I most recently moved to Key Largo from Asheville, North Carolina.
Okay, and where's your most funnest state to dive? That's a loaded question.
Ooh, no, that's an easy one. That's an easy one. Florida. There's
There you
just
go.
so many great dives down here, to be honest with you. Um, Especially throughout the Keys. I've done some diving up in the Cave Country a little bit. And that's a lot of fun too. It's just a different taste of diving, just a different flavor. So Florida for sure.
Nice. Have you done any of the underwater photography stuff here? Have you taken any pictures?
I've messed with the GoPro underwater. That's about it. That's my extent of experience with it.
There you go. The GoPro is actually one of those more easily, and I know that David is a little envious right now because of all the toys he has. He doesn't have the GoPro, but a GoPro is something that you can throw it into your BCD, bring it down when you're diving, pull it out, start taking some photos, and then like Carlos said, or like David said, upload that onto your computer and play with it. It's got some great apps. This is a wonderful tool to have. Now, tell me something, Captain Joe. When you get on a boat with a camera, is there anything different you should do?
Typically, we end up having a couple of camera buckets set up. Divers are encouraged to use those. That way, the camera can acclimate to the water temperature before you actually bring it into the salt water. It avoids the lenses fogging up on you. We also try to make sure during the briefings that everybody on board is aware that there are separate camera buckets and mask buckets. That way, folks don't get their defog inside that camera bucket, which can degrade the O-rings and can actually cause the cameras to flood.
These are types of things that you would actually learn if you were taking the digital underwater photography specialty from a PADI instructor. Is not just the taking the photos underwater, but how you actually handle excuse me, handle the camera at the surface and on the boat. Tell me something, Captain Joe. Are there any specific boat etiquette things that we should know about?
Etiquette's pretty across the board. It doesn't need to specifically fall on somebody that's climbing onto our boat to take a photo class. But when we set up our gear, we like to try and keep everything underneath the bench within the 2 tank space that the person has for their first and second dive. We don't like to spread stuff all over the boat. We don't like to take up areas on the bench where other divers are going to be setting up their gear as well. We try to make sure that everybody's kind of in a team player mode, so to speak. We do have that back table that's available if people want to put their cameras on something dry instead of in the wet bucket. And there is a dry area on the boat as well. That way people can take advantage of not getting any of their change of clothes or their towels wet, that kind of thing.
I see. Now, do you recommend that divers gear up completely when they're sitting down, or is there a certain process that you would have them do?
Part when we're gearing up on our boats, what we recommend is that our divers put their fins on first and then they go ahead and slide into their BCDs. Trying to put your fins on after the fact is a little bit of a troublesome process. It's difficult to kind of twist your body and contort yourself into that specific positioning. So after you're completely geared up, we go ahead and assist you to the back of the boat. We don't like anybody to walk to the back of the boat completely geared up, especially with those fins on. They turn into tripping hazards. So we'll walk you all the way to the stern so you can do your giant stride right off the back of the boat.
Nice, nice. Now, David, I know that on a boat there's sometimes even a station to put your cameras and your lights and all your configurations on it. Could you tell us a little bit about something like that, and also a little bit about light configuration with your camera?
Yeah, I mean, that's a long topic, so I'll be very brief. But basically, just to give you some context, this is my Canon G16. I bought this not specifically for diving. This is actually my camera that I use for all kinds of stuff. But Fantasy makes a housing for it, which is very cool. I just want to make sure you guys can see this. Uh, and you just stick it right in and it seals up. There's a lot of rules about O-rings and stuff that we would talk about in a course. You can use natural light, whether you're doing photos or video. But as anyone who's certified scuba diver knows, we lose color starting with reds very, very quickly as you go deeper. So one thing that people like to do is to have a lighting set up, and usually there's going to be something like this where the camera screws in right here. And you will have one or two lights. I have only one here because I did not follow the correct rules about getting into the water once, and I lost my other light. I was very upset about that. So do what your instructor tells you to do, because otherwise you might lose something. But yeah, so you can have one or two strobes if you're taking photographs, or you can have continuous lights if you're doing video. And there's ways that you need to angle them properly, and that's all part of a course. And it's also a lot of trial by error. It really takes a while before you can become sort of get that sweet spot. And it's fun. It's a fun process. It's challenging, but definitely adding light sort of brings things to life more. And Ross, you mentioned night diving earlier. Obviously, you have to have a light if you're going to be doing photos or video at night.
Excellent, excellent. What we'd like to do now is ask you out there listening, what kind of photo camera setup and light setup do you have? And better still, take a photo of your camera and send it to us. We love to see what kind of configurations people use. As a matter of fact, one of the questions from one of my more favorite listeners out there, he happens to be a family member, but it was a really cool question. My son asked, when you're taking photos at night, and you want to get a photo of a fish but don't want to blind it, what kind of light and how do you angle the light to do so? Any one of our panelists want to hit us with that?
I guess I'll take a step. It's tricky, actually. It's a very tricky process. You always want to be aware of you're going to have your dive light as well as obviously your strobe, which is already on your camera. And it's a little bit discombobulating, but you sort of have your dive light. You always want to not shine it directly into any creature's eyes. You want to sort of always have it sort of so they're in the edge of the light, and that's not going to freak them out as much. It'll also allow you, if they're just at the very edge of the light and they're not freaked out by you, it'll allow you to compose the picture better. Then the strobe will go off. That is unfortunately very blinding. For a very brief moment, and so you have to keep that in mind. You don't want to sort of take multiple pictures, but you can also have the strobe a little bit offset, but you also, if you're certainly the professional photographers are having their light setups exactly the way they need them to bring out all the color and detail. So we always have to try to be respectful of the creatures that live there, though.
There are also some pretty cool pelagic light, red light that can be used. Now, question for you, AJ. When you did
Okay.
and we may be going back a while back, when you did your advanced courses, do you remember what adventure dives that you did that you could potentially have linked to a specialty?
Oh, for sure. That one's easy. We did the adventure dive for peak performance buoyancy, and buoyancy is number one in diving when it comes to your skill set, in my opinion. So definitely, I thought it paid off dividends. It was very helpful, just gaining more control, especially for those wanting to do photography. If you can't maintain or hold the position, then you're not going to get that shot.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, when in many cases, when I'm actually teaching the digital underwater photography specialty, I'll do it directly after a peak performance buoyancy in
Mm.
part of the advanced course so that I can link it to the specialty itself. But one of the things that I'll work on is how not just to get the shot, but how to get your body in the position to take the shot without having to stir up too much silt or anything and without touching anything, right? Because remember, everything underwater is alive until you touch it. So David actually touched on something that was interesting. He said that he entered the water without following the proper procedural rules, ergo, therefore, hence, thus, so he lost a light. Captain Joe, how would he or should he have entered the water with that camera?
Well, we always encourage people that are diving off of our boats with cameras to ask for the camera to be passed down. We try to take very good care of other people's equipment, obviously, but we usually hand it down so that the lens is facing away from the stern of the boat. Should something happen and it were to slip, we don't want to scuff up the lenses that are attached to those housings. Um, uh, by all means, always ask the crew members for help. Never attempt to get into the water by yourself. We typically have folks that like to try and jump in with their cameras. If we can help you in any way, shape, or form, please just let us know. We're there to help you guys out. Handing the camera down is absolutely the safest, easiest way to do things to make sure that your equipment stays in tip-top shape. We don't break or lose anything.
Boat, would you say hand that thing over to me and let me give it to you in the water?
I'm sorry, I missed the question, Ross.
Oh, I was just talking about one of our guests out there has a Canon Sure Shot A1 35 millimeter. Another one has the Paralens GoPro. Are all of the procedures the same for cameras? Should some people just go ahead and jump in, or in your briefings would you recommend something? And the second part of that question is, how important are those briefings?
I'd say about 95% of the issues and problems that we have on the boat stem from folks that weren't paying attention to the briefing, whether it be the dive briefing, the safety briefing, kind of all encompassing. Um, you can enter the water with a GoPro. Absolutely. A lot of folks like to do action shots of their giant strides out on the selfie sticks. We encourage that kind of thing. There is obviously a risk to do that, but the cheaper or the easier to replace the camera, folks like to kind of take advantage of the ability to get those action shots with something like GoPro, which typically out of the box, those are going to be waterproof in and of themselves without the housing. So that if they're inside of a housing, it's just an added protected layer that the person can feel more comfortable with.
Oh, Oh, sorry. I must not have been listening to that briefing. Um, yeah, it's true. Everything is important in the briefing. This is actually one of those selfie sticks that you were talking about, I believe, that you put on, you put the GoPro right there, and then you can do that giant stride in. And if you're really creative, you can get somebody taking a picture of you taking the giant stride in, so you can get a before and after. And there's no end to what you can do. Um, so we've had another couple of questions about some of the interesting courses that we've got and the ways that we can actually get back into the water. Interestingly enough, the Reactivate course, there's a shot of a diver jumping into the water and taking a giant stride back into his dive. Leisurely fun world. And yes, you know what? Now, the Reactivate, which, yes, it used to be called the Scuba Tune Up several years ago, which was a course for any and all that could get back into diving. Then the Reactivate came around for all PADI divers, mainly to get a new card at the same time as refreshing 5 of the skills and any other that you wish. And there is a small e-learning that goes along with it. Very simple, and you can get that going. By the way, hi there, Daniel and Dawn. So now Patty's actually figured out how to not only get a reactivate to all the Patty members, but also to all divers out there. So you would simply go to your local dive shop, your local Patty dive shop or instructor and say, I would like to refresh my dive skills. And they're going to say, great, let's do a reactivate. Are you a Patty diver? If you're not, that's okay. They can still sign you up. You're still going to get a reactivate card. It's not going to say Patty on it, but it's going to say reactivated at the level that you were. So there's a good one for your next course in, or you can go ahead and get that course online with us. Just give us a call here at Rainbow Reef, and we can get you signed up for that reactivate. And also, hi there, Josh. So I would like to go now back to AJ, one of our newer instructors, but certainly one of our more diligent ones. Is there anything that you say and do on the boat, part of the dive briefing, or after you are coming into the canals that you tell people?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry, my signal kind of faded.
All right. So, what I'd like to know is, other than the dive briefing, which we know is paramount, is there anything else that you get to your divers that you're guiding or you're teaching on the boat in a verbal manner before or after the dive, especially when you're going into the docks?
Um, a lot of times, yeah. I mean, it's included in our briefing. A lot of times, we like to tell people about coming up to our retail shops and how they can get free dive trips, stuff like that through our Wheel of Fortune. A lot of questions that I get from people on board because we do have so many people that travel to us. A lot of times they're asking, like where's somewhere to eat, or like what do you guys like to do when you're not diving here? So I try to pass on like restaurant recommendations and stuff like that, really.
What he's talking about is this. Yes, folks, Wheel of Scuba. Ooh, what could we have won? We could have won. Not a free haircut. That's too close. But we could have won some gear. So yes, this is one of the many wonderful things that we do here. I don't have a props guy at Rainbow Reef to help keep you diving, because that's really what we want to do. We want people to dive just as much as we want to dive. We love diving. It's it's something that we miss a lot right now, which is why we're offering you these scuba snacks. Plus, they're a whole lot less filling than anything else that you're going to be munching on while you're watching Netflix and playing video games. So we've come to that part where David has to rack his brain to come up with a new dive site, and I get to ask all of you, what are your favorite dive sites? And I've got a special way to ask you, Joe, when I get to you. David, what's your favorite dive site now?
Today's edition, my favorite dive site is actually Molasses Deep. Now, that's something that you don't hear about quite as
Ooh.
much, but if the
Deep and
currents are
what?
running well, not too strong, but running well, oftentimes we will do a drift dive on the deep end of molasses instead of sort of on top of molasses, and that's really fun to do. And by the way, there's a drift dive specialty, so how about that?
There you go. All right. Which, by the way, is going to be a topic on our next Talk Dive Live, the drift specialty. AJ, what would be your favorite dive site here?
Again, that's super easy. Spiegel Grove, hands down, it's a fantastic dive. It handles all three of my favorite types of dives in general, which is deep, wreck, and a lot of times I'll see sharks out there as well. So, Spiegel Grove, hands down.
Nice. And now, my favorite thing is every now and then we have a captain's choice dive. So, Captain Joe, do you base that off of what your favorite dive site is, or do you base it off of what you think might be the best, or a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. A lot of thinking goes into figuring out where we're going to go for Captain's Choice, actually. We try to take the weather into consideration. If it's looking like it might be kicking up a little bit out there as far as the wind goes, we'll try to find something that's a little more protected. That way, everybody can have an easier time on the surface with less surge. So for north wind, we're able to tuck in behind Molasses Reef, for example. And even with the wind blowing 20 knots directly out of the north, it's pretty easy for us to hide and get people really comfortable conditions to dive in. We try to make sure that we get reef reports from all up and down the reef line, from as far north as the elbow to as far south as Conch Wall. And then we'll make our judgment calls depending on what we've heard as far as the reef reports that we're getting back from other captains that are out there. If the inside is kind of milky, we'll try to keep people out of the inside reefs. We'll go to the outside reefs. So a lot of times, if we're not taking you exactly where you were expecting, or if you wanted a specific request, we are trying to make sure that you have the most enjoyable experience when you get in the water. It's not that we're completely disregarding anything that you're asking us. It's that we're trying to make sure that everybody on the boat collectively is going to have the most comfortable and enjoyable time. We try to make sure that visibility, surface conditions, all of that stuff. And then we've also got, a lot of times classes going on where we need to make sure we're accommodating for those folks that may not be as experienced as some other people on the boat.
Wow. So what I'm hearing is a whole lot more goes into being a head captain than you think and just driving a boat. That's a lot of thinking there, Captain Joe. Wow. So
A
all
couple of
that
things
said,
go
what
into
would
our
be
thought.
well, exactly. Now, we love it. We like to hear about these things. These are the types of things. And if there are other things like this that you guys out there would like to know about, like how do we find the right dive site for a specific course? Or how do we find new dive sites? Or how should we even say, get on a boat, get off a boat? What should be the first specialty that I do? Go ahead, put that in the comments, write it down. If you end up signing up something, maybe we'll give you a spin on the wheel of scuba. But before we leave, you're not going to get off this easy, Captain Joe. Captain Joe, what is your favorite dive site?
You mean you're going to make me choose just one? Um, I have to say the Dwayne personally. I love the wreck. It can be challenging depending on what kind of current we have. We usually try to set it up so that people are able to get on the smokestack. That way they can work their way into the current and then use the superstructure of the wreck to hide. But it's just one of the older wrecks that we have in the Florida Keys. It's got tons of growth on it since it's been down since the late 80s. It tends to be very colorful, a lot of yellow cup corals on the front end of that wreck. And overall, it's just my favorite experience anytime I want to get in the water.
Wow, that sounds fantastic. I hope things aren't that rough at your home. So, again, I'd like to say from all of us here to all of you there, stay safe, stay 6 feet apart. If you've got to wear a mask, might as well be a dive mask, right?
Right.
But for now, thank you for joining us. Thank you, David. Thank you, AJ. Thank you, Captain Joe. Keep on eating those scuba snacks. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks.
See you, everyone. Bye.